Up next, Catholic League President Bill Donohue. But first, this story. Among the official speakers at the World Meeting of Families in Dublin this week was Father James Martin. He is the Jesuit Vatican media advisor and outspoken advocate for the LGBT community. Father Martin told the participants on Thursday that it is a huge step forward for the Church that his talk was allowed at the World Meeting of Families, and further, that his talk was a sign to all Catholics that the Vatican considers LGBT Catholics part of the Church. He told the audience that church and parishes should be more welcoming to active homosexuals and their gifts and to stop discriminating against them.
So the most important thing that we might be able to do for LGBT Catholics is to welcome them into what is already their church. By excluding LGBT Catholics, the Church is falling short of its call to being God's family. By excluding LGBT Catholics, you are breaking up God's family. You are tearing apart the body of Christ.
He added that Francis is the first pope to even use the word gay. Also addressing the World Meeting of Families was embattled Cardinal Oscar Rodriguez Maradiaga, the Pope's top lieutenant with the Council of Cardinals in Rome. He recently condemned a group of seminarians who alleged widespread homosexual behavior at the seminary in the Cardinal's home diocese. He spoke on Pope Francis's revolution of tenderness, as he put it, and opened his talk with what news reports have called Las Vegas-style crooning. It was a song about Pope Francis and the joy of the gospel. It's catchy. Joining me now with his thoughts on the media coverage of the abuse crisis and some other stories of the week is the president of the Catholic League, Dr. Bill Donohue, who joins us from Manhattan. Bill, thanks for being here. Give me your overall critique of this moment, post-McCarrick, post-grand jury report. People are madder than hell, Bill. Your reaction?
Well, I understand why people are livid. They need to be. Otherwise, you're not going to get the kind of reforms that we do need. On the other hand, the twin scandals of the summer of 18, which we will remember for a long time, have to be put in perspective. We're talking about old cases. What McCarrick allegedly did was in the 1980s, most of it. The Pennsylvania grand jury report, the vast majority of the cases before 1990, they go back to World War II. And in every case, just about every case, they never substantiated anything. They never gave a priest an opportunity who was accused to rebut anything. And keep in mind, people, all the priests, and not all of them were priests, by the way. Some were seminarians, some were brothers, some were deacons. But of the priests, they're all either dead or they have been laicized. They are no longer in ministry. So keep in perspective, this is not going on in 2018.
Do you buy the notion, Bill, and we discussed this with Bishop Morlino earlier, that clericalism is the cause of this crisis? The Pope, Cardinal Tobin, others have mentioned clericalism as the root cause.
You've got two problems here. You've got the enabling bishops, not all of them, just a few, and you've got the predator priest. In the case of the enabling bishop, one could argue that clericalism, a kind of a sense that we know better attitude, certainly played a role. In the case of the molesting priest, almost all of them were homosexuals. So you've got to look at it that way. But one thing we have to be very careful about, Pope Francis, on August the 20th, came out with a wonderful letter, and he warned about clericalism. He included the laity, thank you, the laity. Be very, very careful of some of these laymen and women who now are riding their high horse that they're going to resolve all the problems. They come to the table with their hands clean. Remember, Jesus warned us about the purist, okay? Now, we are not a sinless church, and I'm not excusing anyone. I'm simply saying we live in a time of hyperventilation, of where everything is overheated. And yes, we have to get the guilty, but we must protect the innocent. There are too many priests and bishops who I'm afraid are going to get sundered because someone's going to drop a dime and they're going to say, well, something happened to me. He groped me in 1965 or something. We must protect the rights of the priests and the bishops as well as go after the bad guys.
You know, Bill, I've been covering in the secular realm. You've got actors, you've got actresses, you've got directors charged with sexual malfeasance that turned out to be untrue. It was a scorned lover or it was a bad relationship. This same thing at times happens in the church. But also, Bill, you have to say, there does seem to be a new awareness of this, and the outrage is real because the fallout is real. There are victims out there, and that's why I think things have gotten so overheated. Everybody's heart can go out to these victims, and you really do feel you want justice for them. And if there are malefactors out there today, and there are, they should be brought to justice and they should be removed if they're still in office. Now, you issued a detailed response to the Pennsylvania grand jury report earlier this month. You've taken some heat over it. Some see it as a defense of the indefensible, Bill. Is now the appropriate time, given that feeling that people are going through right now and the hurt and the raw emotions, is now the right time to talk about what might be wrong with this grand jury report?
There's no better time than now. Because if I did that next month, nobody's going to care. I had to get out right away, to get out in front of it. I don't want falsehoods out there. People are saying this is going on today. Let me tell you something. The reforms issued by the bishops in 2002 are working. Let me give you two quick examples. Everybody knows that Cardinal McCarrick, he's no longer a cardinal. All these allegations against him, there's a lot of evidence there. Okay, let's assume he is guilty, all right? How do we know he's guilty? Do people realize this because Cardinal Dolan turned him in? Do they realize that? They had these strictures in place, the bishops since 2002. Cardinal Dolan has his own independent reconciliation and compensation program. Someone came forward, they investigated, they found it out. Now, that's not too easy for one sitting cardinal to talk to another cardinal and say, listen, we got enough evidence in here, and we've got to go to the authorities about this. The other case is in the Diocese of Allentown, Pennsylvania, just this week. A priest allegedly was involved in groping and doing some other things to a 17-year-old girl. Now, the media say, well, the authorities got a hold of him. Wait a minute. The bishop there in Allentown found out about this in early June. He contacted the authorities. In other words, the system is, in fact, working today. So that's why I say people have to understand. I'm not against reforms. I'm simply saying that the reforms that the bishops made and many of the dioceses are indeed working.
I just want to pick up on something you said about Cardinal McCarrick. Part of the reason we know he's guilty is the Pope stripped him of public ministry. So within the investigatory purview of the Vatican, and Cardinal Dolan's review board was a part of that, they discovered wrongdoing, and he was guilty, at least in the eyes of the church.
Okay.
Now, whether he's criminally found guilty or they moved to that level, that remains to be seen. I want to talk for a moment. You mentioned in your grand jury debunking release that no one was found guilty of anything. No one, Bill?
Right. Almost nobody. Quite frankly, let's put it this way. Nobody got a chance to rebut it. Now, I know of bishops who have written to Shapiro, the Attorney General, and said, what you have here is false. I know of cardinals who have written to him and said, what you've said here is false. Did he bother to take it out? No. If these guys are dead, how in the world can they rebut the claims?
So are you disputing? So you're disputing the facts as laid out by that grand jury report?
Well, I'm saying simply this: they might all be true. They might all be false. Obviously, not most of them are probably not false. I would guess maybe half of them might be true. Why do I say that? Because I've read all these studies, and I've read what they've said about the John Jay study between 1950 and 2002. They said 4% of the priests in this country had a credible accusation made against them, but only 2% of them were ever substantiated. So they're saying 300 priests, not all of them are priests. I'm thinking the figure might be closer to 150, but we'll never know. Remember, a grand jury report is not factual. Unlike this guy who works at the Weekly Standard, Andrew Ferguson, he says they're factual. What? No grand jury report is factual. And the old adage is you could prosecute and indict a ham sandwich. This is hearsay. A lot of it is true, but none of it is rebuttable. It's one-sided. That's why it's not evidentiary.
Attorney General Shapiro in Pennsylvania claims that, quote, almost every instance of child abuse found was too old to be prosecuted. But, Bill, it happened. I mean, a lot of this did happen. And, you know, we wouldn't have any of this if not for the grand jury report.
Right, right. But I want to compare apples with apples. What percent, for example, of the abusers, will Shapiro ever go after the public schools? Why are we being set up? This is cherry picking. Let me give you a quick example here. Let's say you did a study of street crime, and you found out that non-whites were disproportionately represented. And that's all you talk about. Then you conclude that there must be something congenitally wrong about blacks and Hispanics because they're involved in a lot of crime. Well, there is such a thing called white-collar crime, isn't there, on Wall Street? Doesn't it take place in lawyers' offices, white-collar people in the corporate world? If you don't look at that and make that comparison, you would assume wrongly that people of color are somehow a bunch of criminals. There's an awful lot of white people walking around, very rich people, who are criminals too. I want to see justice be done across the board. I think it's a mistake for the bishops to open up their books to anybody unless one condition is met. You tell me, Attorney General, you tell me, District Attorney, that you're not just going to cherry pick the Catholic Church, that you're also going to demand that the public schools and the Jewish schools and the Protestant schools and everybody else will open up their books, and then we'll do so. Otherwise, we are subverting the church in the name of justice.
Should the statute of limitations be lifted to prosecute some of these cases, as the grand jury has suggested here, Bill?
They don't. Listen, we have been lied to by Shapiro and by Mike Rossi. He's the one pushing it. When I say they're lied to, I know this stuff. I live this stuff every day. Every bill that Rossi and that Shapiro's endorsed doesn't cover the public schools. And unless you explicitly cover the public schools, they are protected by what's called the doctrine of sovereign immunity. That means you have 90 days to file a claim. You don't have. So if you want to suspend the statute of limitations, fine. I pushed for that in New York, pushed for the public schools. Guess what happened in 2009? She's no longer an assemblywoman. Margaret Markey said, okay, we'll include the public schools. Guess who went bonkers? The teachers' unions, the school superintendents, the principals. They said, you can't go back. The reason why we have statutes of limitation is because most of the witnesses are either dead or their memories are faded. So I am for equal justice before the law. I don't think any bishop should ever cooperate with any law enforcement unless, in fact, the same playing field is being invoked against everybody else in the public and in the private sector.
Well, the bishops are already pledging to work with law enforcement. I mean, you mentioned a moment ago a bishop who turned over a malefactor. Don't you think that's a good idea?
No, I don't think it's a good idea. You don't ever make public the accused. You go forward with the convicted. No, I do want to know the names of the convicted. This Bishop Accountability has the names of priests up there who were accused and then found innocent. Their names are still up there by Bishop Accountability. I wouldn't trust them. The head of Bishop Accountability, Terrence McKiernan, said a few years ago that Cardinal Dolan was hiding 55 priests. I've contacted him several times. I said, please, give me the names of the 55 priests whom Dolan is protecting. He's never answered me. What I'm saying is that an awful lot of people are lying. You've got truths, you've got half-truths, and you've got out-and-out lies. The Catholics have to be very careful about how they filter these things. But yes, get the bad guys, absolutely.
We saw an outgrowth of this report this week, an act of violence against a priest in Indiana, a Byzantine Catholic priest. He was beaten before Mass. The abusers who came into the sacristy said, "This is for all the kids," they yelled at him. Do you fear more violence like this? And what is the answer here, Bill?
Well, I've certainly gotten my share of threats, I'll tell you that. And all I can tell you is this. The person responsible, obviously, is the assailant. But secondary responsibility, or at least tertiary, has to go to those people who are the Catholic haters. I'm talking about the Catholic suing lawyers and the Catholic hating activists.
Do you not believe that there is a network, a subculture at these seminaries that are actively promoting the kind of behavior that we're seeing play out in these reports, whether they be of ancient pedigree or not?
Well, we know that Father Richard McBrien, a man of the left, said there's a homosexual subculture. Father Cousins, a man of the left, says there's a homosexual subculture. Father Andrew Greeley, a man of the left, called it the Lavender Mafia. We have problems in Boston. We have problems in France. We have problems in Honduras. Let's not worry about World War II. I want to find out what's going on in the seminaries today. Why, if there is a homosexual subculture that's still going on, and no doubt there is, it's going on in Rome. We all know what's going on in Rome. It's not just in the United States. We also have to be careful here. I don't want an attack on all gay priests. People might be surprised to hear that. I want to get the people who are guilty, not the ones who are innocent. But of course there's a subculture, and that has to be busted.
Bill Donohue, thank you for being here. You can follow Bill's work at thecatholicleague.org.